Hello and welcome to Conversations about Language Teaching. I'm your co-host, Dr. Reed Riggs, he, him.
And I'm Dr. Diane Neubauer, she, her.
And this topic today is addressing a question, a kind of question that we get a lot, and we're going to address sort of in a general sense. We've talked it through how we're going to address this. And so there's
Mhm.
sort of two parts to this, and the first part has to do with how we how we want to use research and how we should not use research. I think we may or may not title this "Use Research, but Not Like This."
Yeah,
But then it gets to the question that the people asking for the research was trying to get at, which is how should I assess?
yeah,
Those are the two
yeah,
parts that
yeah. So
go
valid
together.
question.
Mhm.
Great, that many teachers are motivated to well, show me what one piece of research answers my question about this or that. And so I love that they value research. I love that they're wanting to be well informed as a teacher about their classroom practices. But research, one research item doesn't address what they're asking.
Yeah.
These are the question, and the thing that research can do is different. And we have, of course, an episode, one of the earlier ones, about research. So we won't launch into all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but do you want to
So
talk
let's
about
get
that
at
first?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the let's give context. So the question, the type of question that we get is can you give me one research article that tells me how to assess, for example?
Yeah.
And that's the one we're going to focus on today.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
I've heard it too about well, give what one research article could I read that would really tell me how to teach,
yeah,
and
so
like that. Like again, it's like great motivation. I
right,
love that you want to be research informed.
yeah.
However,
hmm So there's a very sympathetic, empathetic way to understand what teachers are asking for when asking for research, and then there's like a less sympathetic one. So let me kind of cover both.
yeah,
Um, I think the first type, Dan, you've called the less empathetic kind. You've called proof texting,
yeah,
and that's where you already have something you want to do, and then you want research to defend what you're already doing.
yeah,
And so that I would say is just not a good way to go about much in your
yeah.
profession.
It
Yeah,
can also look like,
right.
let me have the research that tells my colleague they're
Yeah,
wrong.
that's right. Yeah.
Or
Or at
it
least
can be in a
protects
more
me.
positive
Sure,
motivation where it's
protects
like,
me. Yeah.
I want to know that I'm doing this right. So give me the research that will tell me how to do it. Like maybe they're open-minded. They're not
You're right. And
thinking I should do this or that. But it's still like wanting one thing to tell them all the
right.
answers and make
And
it
that
all
is,
crystal clear forever. And that's
yeah,
not really how it works.
that's the better version of it. So
Yeah.
the more cynical one is like, I'm already doing something. I want something to either make me feel good about what I'm doing or defend to my department what I'm doing. But then the better version is, I want some guidance, but I need to start somewhere. And so can I have one research article that shows me exactly what I need to be doing? In both cases, and if you listen to our earlier episode about what research
What
can
can
and can't
teachers get
do,
from, yeah.
what can teachers get from research? It's not usually made for that. So usually research there is some classroom research, but even that, if they're doing science, they're trying to understand how a process works. It's going to be observations about how a process works, and it's probably not going to end in a recommendation for what to do. Okay, it probably is, but I don't
Yeah,
think
but not
it's usually shoehorned
holistic
in, and I don't like that part of research where they're
Yeah.
saying we had a research question about how something happens in classrooms. How is identity established? How is language being used? How is assessment happening? How are people taking turns during an
Mhm.
assessment? They're just trying
Yeah.
to explore how some sort of
Yeah.
process works.
Yeah. And maybe
Yeah.
here's the possible outcomes that we see from this kind of approach. And we
Yep.
don't see as much of these kinds of outcomes. So,
Yep.
like, it could suggest,
hmm
like, oh, if I have this goal and
Yep.
I want my students to have these outcomes, then it
Sure.
sounds like those kinds of practices lead towards that more.
Yep.
So it's not like research is like, oh, it just doesn't matter. It
No.
does matter, but it's not
It's
like
small. It's a small implication and not a heavy
yeah.
implication, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And your context will be different, so you need
Absolutely.
to be interpretively,
Yep.
wise about what
Yep.
you're doing there.
Yeah, when you
So
read
you're,
about, yeah, university students being pulled into a research project to sit in a laboratory in front of a computer that checks their eye tracking, And then it
Yeah.
says something about how, words that are provided in chunks first and then broken up later seem to result in better learning compared to the other group that had words separated first and presented in chunks secondarily.
Mhm.
Your takeaway shouldn't be, oh, I should present these exact chunks to my students. There's something about the brain being gradually
Interested. Yeah.
uncovered there. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing too, is that each researcher is trying to just do the next little piece of research. They're not
Right.
trying to do the big next discovery, not in one research article.
Right.
You might get a book that goes through a whole thing, but not in one research article. They're usually small increments that are adding to an
Right.
ongoing research interest.
Right. That's why I think in that previous episode we also suggested, if you're really wanting to kind of get started, it can be really helpful to read a more broad literature review kind of a book chapter
Sure.
or a
Yeah.
book like
Yeah.
How Languages Are Learned by Lightbound and Spada,
That's a good one.
or some of
Yeah.
the work that Bill Van Patten has done
Yeah.
on While We're on the Topic, which has
Yeah.
a new
New
second
edition.
edition
Yeah.
out here.
I
So
want to
that's
try to
exciting.
get department funding to get that for myself.
Yeah, so these are research informed things that you can gather some principles out of,
Yeah.
and think through your own goals. But
They've
so
those
yeah,
books
yeah,
usually have done more of the processing for you, where they've done more of the
this is true.
interpretation of that research and put it together in ways that they're still going to be careful. They're not going to say every teacher in every context now must do this. You still have to do the work. But
Yeah,
usually those kinds of teacher facing researchers, like when researchers are writing for a more educator kind of audience, including teacher trainers, including school administrators, policymakers, and teachers, they're still going to be broad enough to leave you space to adapt it for your context. Yeah.
right, right, right. So being research informed is wonderful, and it's a constant pursuit a little bit.
Yeah.
Like we want to keep an open mind. We want to
Right.
keep learning and growing, right? So
Yep. Um, I think, well, let's see. Was that the main point before we get to our
yeah,
thoughts
I think
about
that's all I
assessment?
wanted to say about it.
Yeah. Use
So we
research,
we
but
are
not like this. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we have some research knowledge, and we have some thoughts of our own, and we have our own experiences, and we're going to glom that together as we
Hmm.
usually do in these episodes,
Hmm.
and share some thoughts to
Yep.
answer the question about, like, well, how should you particularly test students, or how should you assess students more
Yeah.
broadly?
I think standards-based grading is on the right track. Your students are often in a school setting, they're doing the work of being students, which is tracked by grades. And when they don't follow their grades, they very quickly get their attention put back on the grades by their teachers, by their counselor, by their families who get called in to have a meeting to say, hey, these grades are
Yeah.
slipping. The school will
Right.
always remind the students, everybody, the humans at the school will always remind the students, your grades are the measurement of everything that you're doing. And
Yep.
so they're going to default to that. And if they don't, then they hit all these problems. And so if they're not defaulting to it, then in a school context, it's going to be treated as a problem by the teacher and everyone else who's relevant. And so the first thing to check is are we aligning when they look at their grades, what are they seeing? And if it's
Yeah.
something like homework grade, quiz grade, test grade, final exam grade, then they're going to think of just how do I, you
How do I
know,
conquer that?
how do I conquer that thing?
Yeah.
But that thing is
If they
that
care about grades.
if they care about grades, but those categories aren't informing them about the learning outcomes. Like
Right.
on their face, they're not. Because if you have a mix of things in the final exam, a mix of things on the quizzes, then they're like, okay, I did the mix of things. That's not really helping them track their growth in the kinds of growth that the teacher wants them to care
Yeah.
about,
Yeah,
and to grow
like
in.
language development. Like, can
Yep.
you understand more? Can
Yep.
you say more?
Can
Can
you
you
say
write
more?
more? Can you
Can you
read more,
can you talk on this
more
topic?
widely?
Can you
Can you
understand
be
an
more
article on this
culturally
topic?
insightful?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep. So the teacher should lay out all those goals in the curriculum.
yeah. And then
But
by
yeah,
giving those things explicit mention in what you're grading,
right.
I think that then builds the student's sense of trust. Like, oh, that really is an important thing here,
Yeah.
because my grade is related to
Yep.
how I do interpretive reading or
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah.
And
And it helps,
yeah,
it aligns your conversations as well when you're telling the students, they're like, oh, how can I bring up, if the student comes to you and says, how can I bring up my listening grade? They're already starting the conversation about
Yeah.
the actual language competency
Skill.
and listening. So then you
Yeah.
can, that prompts that conversation about, oh, listening is going to be based on a combination of my questions to you after you do your poster presentation and some of these audio recordings that we're going to listen to and do some sort of interpretive work with.
Yep.
And so you want to keep those things aligned and obvious to the students in how you name
Right.
them, how you talk about them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we've named a couple different ways. I mean, like you can do things like that if you're in the US and you're familiar with ACTFL terms about modes of
mm,
communication. They would talk about interpretive mode, interpersonal mode, and presentational mode. So can you hear something or read something or see something signed and be able to get a message out of that?
yeah,
And then can you back and forth? Can you negotiate meeting? Can you go back and forth on the spot, not
yep,
rehearsed?
yep,
And then can you prepare something that you're going to share in written form, in spoken
yep,
speech, kind of?
yep,
But so those can be helpful, but I think in some ways those are hard to categorize an individual
sure,
thing
yep.
into in some ways. I mean,
Mhm.
so sometimes
They're a
the
little
four
lofty.
skills
They're kind of lofty, I
still,
think. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think you said in the IB that they do the four skills kind of assessment, like
So
there's categories this,
the grades that are already in our learning management system for the middle year program, grades 6 through 10, are automatically listening, speaking, reading, writing. And so
yeah,
all of my assignments that are going to be the big graded things we do are contributing to listening, speaking, reading, or writing. And that forces me to say, oh, I've assessed reading, I've assessed writing. I got to figure out something that's going to put a listening grade in the grade book. But
yeah,
I, as a teacher who cares, want to find something worthwhile. And so sometimes in the past when I didn't have time, I'd say, you know what, here's a text from something we've read before. Just read it out loud, and that'll be good enough. Put a grade in the grade book. So I have done that when I
because you
didn't
have
have
to have
time.
something.
I need
Yeah,
I need a grade in the grade book. Then what I did though is I started to say, you know what, I still don't have time to plan something new, but I do care about this showing your ability to interpret meaning from the text instead of just say the words in the text. And so I would then have a follow-up discussion about the information in that text.
they read. Yeah,
And it still comes back to me not having enough time to find a good separate reading to have a conversation about. But at least it's pushed me to elevate it beyond just saying a bunch of words.
yeah,
You
yeah,
do read it out loud to me, and then I ask you questions about what you just read. And that's where I catch students being like, oh, I don't know what it says. And they
yeah,
go, great. So that's what you got to work on. And we'll do more in class. I'll help you with
yeah.
it. We'll do more reading in class. We'll do more discussions in class. But also in your preparation for this thing, you know what you need to be ready for. It's not enough to just
Right.
say words. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And it just a kudos to you with the attitude there, because I'm thinking, student says like, "Oh, I don't know what that means," and I'm like quietly sinking into a pit of
It's
despair, and
a,
you're like, "Great,"
it's a,
like the
it's a
okay,
default
now we
I've
found
been,
the problem.
sure.
Okay.
It's a default I've been dealing with for years. And it's very
Yeah.
familiar to me now that in
Yeah.
Mandarin, see, I've had students during study hall in my room read Spanish out loud. And then I ask them, how much did you understand? And they'll say, oh, about 80%. Spanish allows you to read every word out loud. Chinese
Yes.
characters do not. And you
Right.
have to do all this extra work of like checking, like somehow having a
Yeah. It's
digital
not
version.
phonetic.
No, it's not phonetic. So you have to have a digital version to copy and paste into like Google Translate to get the pinyin. It's all these extra
Mhm.
steps that you can't just have a printout and know how to say anything.
Right.
So
Yeah, so if they're just going at some kind of a document that they haven't really worked on
yeah,
understanding, they're not going to be able to do it without that kind of tech
yep,
hack.
yep.
And then you
And
don't understand it because, yeah,
yeah,
it's just this, the opinion is just the phonetic system to pronounce words. It's not
right. It's
telling
so
you
I don't
about the
it's
meaning.
not pinyin for its own sake, the phonetic writing for its own sake. It's that I need you to know how to say what this text is on the page
What this
at a
is.
minimum so that then I can ask you questions about the meaning of the text. And so you can show
Hmm.
your ability to interpret the meaning of the text, which then is getting
Hmm.
into interpretive mode communication in the
Yep.
actual terms. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that took me like an
Have
extra year to
to
get
figure
beyond
that.
just read out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Puzzles, puzzles.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Something else about that, like if you have those, like the four skills thing, or if you have the three modes of communication as the kind of the way that you're looking at language and the skills
the
involved
sass,
in
yeah, the
using language,
sure.
I think there are options for different percentages.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you're mandated to have them in the high school where I last taught. We had the four skills approach, but we could set a different percentage.
Yeah,
So in level one, I put speaking as low as possible because
sure.
I think that's something that develops later.
Yeah,
And so I was going to do things that were much reduced in that area with my, especially first semester level one.
yeah,
And some of it was just really more like interpersonal communication within whole class discussions
yeah,
in the room. And so were they engaging in those things? That was really the goal.
yeah,
So it was not a whole presentation where they give a speech in front of the whole class for 5 minutes. That would be, like
sure.
there's a whole range of things that could still fit the same bucket.
Yep.
And you could make one bucket small and you could make one bucket bigger. And over time, you might even shift that. So a student with more intermediate level proficiency after a few years of class, maybe you want to bump up the speaking area because they do have proficiency at that point that
Yeah.
you want to let them get credit for. And so you can play with those numbers, I think.
It
Like I
sends
lean
it,
towards the interpretive.
sure. It sends a really more honest message to students that as beginners, you're trying to focus on your listening and reading, your interpretive skills,
Yeah.
interpretive competencies, and we're not trying to speak a whole lot at the beginning. We don't, our system isn't set up for that. It's just out of 8 points for every summative. And we
Mhm.
also don't accumulate points. It's,
Mm.
we're tracking your growth over time.
Oh, yeah.
And so we've had meetings with the language
Yeah.
teachers,
So standards based kind of
standards
thinking about
based.
that. Like it's
Yeah.
like what you can do at this
At the
final
end,
point.
right at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I do is as a department, we've just agreed that we just set whatever's level appropriate. So for your speaking, whatever kind of speaking makes sense for your current level, we just set our assessments at that. And so yeah, if it is a poster presentation, which I'm not sure, I think all the middle year, I think the sixth graders and seventh graders are doing posters and presenting them, I think. But they would just do something that's, simple for them, appropriate for their
Mhm.
level.
Right.
And then as they can ratchet up those skills over time of how to get up in front of the class and say some stuff,
Hmm.
maybe more and more coherent, more and more
Right.
in depth, having the vocabulary to do that as they go. So
Yeah, so you're not asking for a novice learner to do something that's got all
like
this
an eighth
variety
grade
of
level,
vocabulary
no,
and stuff, but
no.
yeah, you're doing like basic can do things like
So like what
can
isn't,
greet somebody, can
yeah.
say something about what
Tell
they
me
like or
some
don't like,
basic
or like,
facts about food if it's a food kind of topic.
yeah,
But it's going to still be 8 out of 8 as the scoring system.
yeah,
But it's yeah, and so if you did have a cumulative scoring system where it was like 25, if it has to be 25% for each of the four skills, for example, if you're stuck in that kind of system, you still just modify what it is. But I like what you're
yeah,
saying
what you're asking.
because to me it communicates more honestly what skills should be emphasized
Right.
earlier versus later on. And maybe I had friends do the Princeton and Beijing PIB, I think, and they would have daily debates. So they go home and study some text, come out and debate each other. And for that kind
Ah,
of system, for these like advanced selective kind of like this like high level program, you might have something that's like 80% of your grade is your speaking ability during debates because that's
yeah,
what those
because
kids are
that's the
signing up
goal.
for. They have the competencies.
Yeah,
So it makes sense to have your weights reflect what kinds of skills you're trying to emphasize.
right, right.
I would also push that we got to be really careful about washback effects
Hmm.
where what you're aiming to get your students ready to do in assessments has these sort of implied impacts where we do act on it,
Yeah,
where it's what
yeah.
we do during
Washback being
instruction
those effects in
on
instruction
on
of what you're
instruction.
testing. Yeah,
Right. So if you're saying we got to get ready for, equal parts listening, speaking, and writing, that the instruction should be equal parts listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And that's the part where I think we have to be really careful. Your students are going to
yeah.
gain a lot from exposure, and there really should be a lot of exposure. There should also be some time for like rehearsing the thing they're going to perform. If it's going to be a poster presentation, I do a formative version and then a summative version, and the formative score doesn't go anywhere. It's just feedback to say,
For
okay, what you
them.
just
Yeah.
did, let me show you on the rubric what I've underlined here in the descriptors, and I have my thumb over the number so they don't read that and just walk away because they will. So they kind of look at the descriptors and I say, guess the number. What do you think it'll be? And they're like, I don't know, somewhere in like a 5 or a 6. And then I'll lift my thumb up and they'll go, okay. But then they'll usually say, wait, what does this mean though? Like, what does this little part mean? And I'll say, well, it's because in your presentation, you didn't address the required information that you were supposed to address in your presentation. And they'll go, oh, wait, so if I do that, can I get an 8? And I go, if you do these extra things, you can get an 8 on the summative. And they go, hold on. So let me check my poster with you. If I talk about this and I
Yeah.
talk about this, and I talk about this and I talk about this, that'll get me an 8. And I'm like, yes, that's how you get the 8. And
Yeah.
they're like, okay, I'll go
So
back and
the
practice.
see the rubric means something,
The
dear
rubric
dear
means something.
students.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm not pulling this out of
Yeah.
my head,
I've
and
just I've just found that it's like that's how you lead a horse to water is it's like you
yeah.
have to they're there for the grade number and I go, okay, come on over here.
Yeah,
Now that you're
yeah.
looking at this piece of paper and my thumb is over the number, let's talk
Yeah.
about these. And then they're like,
What are these
wait a
things?
minute. Yeah, they always act like
Yeah.
it's this like new thing. And I'm like, okay, but if this is what it takes, this is how I get you to look at the rubric descriptors.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
anyways,
Because very
that,
often that, like you say, like they're wanting a score
yep,
and they want to get what score they want to get.
yep.
And if they care about grades, they want it
If
to
they
be
care
really
about
high.
grades. Yep,
And so, yeah, but if that's not clearly tied to actual language ability,
yeah,
then there, yeah, why would they bother with that? So if,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, what are you using language to communicate about? And that's so that comes to another point is that I often see rubrics fall into the same default that I've mentioned in a lot of our prior episodes that, the teacher's default to forms, accuracy of grammar, accuracy of vocabulary, accuracy of pronunciation,
yeah,
students default to thinking that's the goal, parents default to thinking that that's the goal.
everybody does. Yeah,
Rubrics also default to that goal, where rubrics are often
yeah,
like, and I think of it as like, we're using language to communicate some sort of meaning about, some kind of information or thoughts about things or ideas. And so the language and the meaning are coming together. And so it's kind of two sides of a coin. And rubrics will often say, like, their pronunciation is accurate enough to communicate the meaning of what they're trying to talk about. And the word usage is accurate enough to communicate the meaning of what they're trying to talk about. The grammar is accurate enough to communicate the meaning of what they're trying to talk about. And I
hmm
find that you're looking at the wrong side of the coin if we want them to focus on meaning. You're
yeah.
still
It's still communicating. The focus on
you
forms is
focus
the
on
thing
form.
that you're
It's like,
really
are my
looking
words
for.
accurate enough? Or is my
Right.
pronunciation accurate enough? And it's like, so what I've written my own rubric that has like one point about one line about accuracy. Let me see if I do have this pulled up. Can I read
hmm
this? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So this is the summatives speaking score for 7 to 8. The student, number one, I wrote this myself. Okay. Uses a wide range of vocabulary, generally accurately, with some complex cohesive devices. And I've taken that from
Mhm.
the original rubric. And when they ask, how do I do that? I tell them, you know what? If you just cover the information that needs to be in your presentation, this will follow.
So we'll do.
I
Yeah,
do
this
not
is just part
recommend,
of communicating it
I
that
don't
way.
recommend you start with a list of vocabulary. And
Right.
I tell them when you're going to go walk up to a friend at school and just hang out, you don't think of a list of words prior to getting there and then say, I got to make
Yeah.
sure we cover these words. Your
Right.
exploration of the information and topics will bring about that vocabulary. So don't lead with the vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay, and then number two, communicates all or almost all the required information with a clear sense of audience and purpose to suit the context. So you give we have an opening that's like 各位老师各位同学大家好欢迎来到今天的报告. It's a memorized speech opening that they hear each other and they start every poster with this and it just becomes so quick and automatic for them because they hear and
Yeah.
say it just through for 2 years, 8 total
Yeah. It's a
units,
very, very standard
standard.
heard thing when you hear
Yep.
somebody give a speech in China. Like, so you're greeting everyone and then you're saying,
Today's topic is
thank you
about,
for, yeah,
yeah, thanks for
thank
being
you for
here.
being here. And
Yep.
yeah. hmm
Okay. organizes information effectively and coherently in appropriate format. So I don't want you to jump around. Like the things you talk about should make sense. So if you're talking
Yeah.
about clothing, if you're talking about an emergency plan, whatever your topic is, it just needs to make sense and not jump around. So again, pushing them to think about the meaning of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Then I have this last one. During interaction, communicates all or almost all the required information clearly and effectively. And this is because I'm going to ask them a bunch of follow-up questions based on what they just said, because I found in the past that they memorize a script and they don't know what they're saying. They don't know the meaning. It's just a string of sounds. And so if they know that questions will follow, then they do get that extra input. So the assessment has this extra part that's just good for their language, that they're
Yeah.
having a little interaction with me,
Yeah.
but also it pushes them to be aware of the meaning of what they're talking about a little
Right.
bit more. So
So they can't
that's,
game it like
you can't
just,
game it.
well, if I can just memorize some sounds and produce them, then I get
Yeah.
it. And like,
Yep.
well, that's obviously not the goal of the language class. So
I
yeah,
used to
making
think
sure
that,
that they can't
yeah,
do that.
right. I used to think that it would add up to, like it would contribute to their language development. And I started to find that when I would have readings in the next unit or some sort of thing where I was like, guys, we just talked about this a bunch. You guys had it in your presentations. How do you not have any memory of this? And so now I think when we see students, we're like, oh, how do they forget everything? I would say that they never got it to begin with, that it
Yes.
was a false, it was a fake facade that they put up in front of you that had you thinking that they meaningfully
Yeah.
were talking about something or meaningfully using certain words. I wouldn't say that they forgot the words. I would say they never learned the words.
Yeah.
And when I say learn the words, I don't mean memorized vocabulary in isolation. I mean
Yeah.
built up a sense. I mean learning in the psychological sense that
Yeah.
they built up mental representation of its usage and that
Right.
they never did that. So they didn't
Right.
forget the words. They never got the
They just never
words.
had it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So I think that that's an important thing with your rubrics is that if you're only focusing on forms, then the students are just going to care about forms and
Right.
accuracy,
So really clearly get it to
r-
message, meaning,
meaning,
expression.
yeah,
Yeah.
just
If you're,
communication.
if it's a productive, great.
Yeah. So,
The other thing I was thinking about rubrics, and I wondered if you had this, but I have been into single point rubrics. Have you
mhm.
heard of single point rubrics?
Yeah. Do you want
Know what
to
I'm talking about?
define that for us?
My sense of it is that rather than having like, four columns with lots and lots of words everywhere about describing each level of, let's say maybe it's standard space. So you've got maybe I forget what the lower one usually is, the one that's like not even, maybe it's approaching,
Oh, yeah.
developing, target level, and then exceeding.
Yeah.
There's usually like four categories, and each one can have all kinds of wording. If you actually want to make this useful to you and actually read by students, putting just one there in the middle, like what is the standard you're trying them to reach?
Mm.
And then leaving space on either side. Here's how you did not quite make it there yet. Here's some suggestions. And here, or on the other side of it, here's how you've exceeded that already.
Yeah.
Wow, kudos to you. You can do this and this extra thing. But if you hit this target, then what does that, look like?
Yeah.
So it's briefer and it's easier, and it's also like honing their sense in on like, well, maybe I want to see what's the least I can do here to still get a C. Like
Right.
that, you don't want them
Oh,
to
yeah.
think of a rubric like that, right? You want them
Sure.
to think about a rubric as like, here's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yep.
Hopefully we're aligning with their actual proficiency, like the
Yep.
time that they have on task and their
Yep.
actual language exposure and development. So you want to write a rubric that's reasonable still, like single point rubrics don't magically fix everything, but I
Oh,
think it is way more useful.
yeah.
Good feedback. I think they're more inclined to look at comments then rather
Yeah.
than just, this whole big page of dense text. Like,
Yeah. I
wow.
mean, think of your students as the user,
Yeah.
and if they struggle with a certain term, I had the word holistic on my description of poster design. So you need to, one of my checklist items was that your poster needs to have a holistic design, that everything's kind of centralized around one main point. And a student said, "What does holistic mean?" And I said, "Oh, it's like one whole thing." Our spelling of the word holistic is confusing. There's no
Ah,
W, and
right.
there probably should be.
Weird.
So I
Oh, I
changed
know.
it for him. I just said, let's call it a centralized design. And then he said, now it has the word central twice. So we fixed the definition after it. But
Yep.
then it was clear to him. I think you should
But
do the same
that's
thing with your rubrics. Is like watch how design
how do
mindset
you,
is that you see how your students read it, you see where they get confused, and then you edit and modify for them as the user, the reader of the rubric.
yeah. Well, and you've also hit on something. If you're
Yeah.
going to assess your students, they need to know how are they going to be evaluated? So they
Right.
should
Right.
see that rubric before you ever have some
Oh
kind of
yeah.
assessment using it.
Yes.
And some of that back and forth with them would be great.
Yes.
Like, okay, what does this mean to you?
Yeah.
Do you see how you're doing that? Okay, let's look at a couple examples.
Yep.
Okay, let's think about this as we do this next activity in class. How would you rate
Yeah.
yourself on
Yeah.
that
Remember the
time? And
rubric?
so,
Yeah. And also, you can
mhm,
keep it open the whole time that you start at the beginning and say, do you think we can accomplish this? And maybe if they say, no, that looks too hard, you'd be like, oh, trust me, we've done this last year. We will get there. It's actually what this whole unit's going to train us to do. Like
yeah,
the co-editing process with the students as a little mini activity in itself
yeah,
can really clarify to them what's coming up. It can help with engagement, and it can help with them doing the kinds of work and paying attention to the things
things you
that
want.
they're like, oh yeah, we're getting ready in a couple
Yeah.
weeks to do the thing that rubric described.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think it can help them move away from the excessive focus on forms with an S again, like
yeah,
that little, grammar endings,
yeah,
exact pronunciation, and get them thinking about meaning and
yeah,
communication instead. Because if those rubrics are going to reflect that, then they're going to see that from the beginning,
yeah.
like, okay, this is the way I'm graded in this class.
Right.
It's not about, did I ever make a mistake?
Yeah,
Sometimes, I mean, like if in an interpersonal thing, if they messed up something and they were unclear, but then they were able to work their way around it and get their message across at the end, well, then
yeah,
that's super.
yeah.
They did exactly what you're supposed to do with language.
Yep.
So it's like that wrong, quote unquote, wrong
Yeah,
part is not a problem. It's not
yeah,
lowering their grade. Hopefully over time it starts to reduce
yeah,
the anxiety about
yeah,
production of language because they know
yeah.
it's not about perfection here. It's
I think
about
you and I are assuming that other teachers think like us in this communicative,
yes.
developmental kind of
Well,
way.
this is why the
That this might
goal
push you
is
though. This might push you to be a little more like us in this communicative way of thinking and developmental stages way of
yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
where if you are a teacher who assesses totally on accuracy, where students write something, they lose points for every error they make, and then that's the grade. But then you have a rubric that's talking about communication that might push you or give you some support
mhm, yeah, to
in
help you change.
yeah, change a little bit to then, because I think a lot of teachers who focus on accuracy in their assessments will still say to students, hey, when you're out in the world and you're in an office where they only speak this target language, you're going to have to be able to communicate in this effective way. I think we all still care about communication even when it's not reflected in our
Yeah,
assessments. So
right.
hopefully you can align these long-term visions for, what's the profile of a graduate that you're trying to
Yeah,
paint in your students' minds for themselves, to have your assessments come into line with that.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I had another thought about assessment that is a commonly discussed thing again in world language in the US, and that's the IPA, the
integrated
integrated performance
performance
assessment.
assessment.
I do like performance assessment, like where you're actually, rather than being tested on a list of vocabulary in isolation, you're doing something that shows you can interpret the meaning of a passage that uses those words. Or
Yeah,
so that's a performance versus like
contextualized. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So you're using language to do something.
sure.
Using language includes interpretive skills.
Yep,
So reading,
reading,
listening.
listening.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what do you think about IPAs?
So I think IPAs, so the integrated part is the part I see a lot of people miss out on that part of it. So there's performance assessments, performance-based assessments
Yeah.
typically emphasize authentic materials. So you're showing what you can do with
In the IPA, especially
in the
that
IPA, yeah.
system. Yeah.
So yeah, you're showing what you can do with a real news article or a real YouTube video or a real advertisement or a
And by
real
real, you mean not
graph.
designed for learners, something
Yeah, it's
found in the
it's
world, right?
something found outside of the classroom for an audience who is not learners, typical magazine audience, a typical newspaper audience, a typical YouTube audience. or whatever specific audience it was made for by that creator.
Yeah.
And so it I like it as a part of a balanced diet of all the things we want to do in a classroom. It helps give a sense to all the other stakeholders, what can your students do when they get outside your classroom? Because if a teacher says,
Yeah.
oh, they're just not ready to, they can do the things that I create for them, they can't do anything outside of the classroom. I think a lot of stakeholders would say, parents and faculty and administrators and maybe the students themselves would say, well, what good is this class if I can't do anything outside the class? And so, as an assessment, it is a check to see that they're able to recognize words in contexts that are just naturally outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
And to be able to listen to fast speech, that's a whole other skill. J.D. Brown, a researcher in assessment, UH, retired a few years back. He said one of his next projects was to look at for ESL learners to make a textbook audio series, something like that, that would be for training fast listening.
Mm,
And I tell my students a lot, they're like, can I slow this down? And I say, oh, have fun with that. Slowing down fast speech doesn't put the sounds back
right.
in. So
Right.
if an English speaker says, like, hey, what do you know about this? Or, what happened? Slowing it down doesn't make it into I don't know.
Yeah.
It's still and this happens in Mandarin with fast speech. Like people just
Yeah.
leave out sounds because that's part of fast speech. And if you're never exposed to it, then you shouldn't be expected to understand it when you hear it. So
Right.
I think it can have some positive washback in the classroom where the training for it has us listening multiple times and some scaffolding where the teacher points out, a little bit of
Hmm.
contextualized focus on form, that kind of ear training. So I think the integrated part adds, usually you start with the interpretive mode and then the teacher gives feedback on it and then you have your interpersonal mode, I think, next, and
Yeah,
then the next
usually.
day you have your presentational mode, and it's
Presentational.
all in like one
Yeah.
thematic area such as recycling or environmental
Right.
pollution.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know that
that,
it's
like, I've heard
practical.
people,
Yeah.
like you
Right.
said, like this can be 3 full days in a
Yeah.
row of
Right.
time in the classroom. So
Yep.
if you have 100 hours of class time in a
Yeah. Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
and every quarter at least you're doing, I mean, to me, it's a time versus
Yeah.
goals in the class. Like
So you
I,
have to
like,
consider your context and the practicality
yeah,
of running it. Yeah. But
yeah, that,
performance assessments don't have to be integrated in that way, where
right.
like we start with
You can do
listening about
shorter, smaller.
recycling, and then we do
Yeah.
an interactional dialogue about recycling, and then we do a presentation about recycling. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
so like that might be a goal you want to aim for, but you could just do separate performance assessments that are on some other general topic.
Right.
I think mine are more like
Right.
that.
Yeah. There's
Yeah,
one of my professors was involved in research on assessment a lot. So Leah Platkins.
yeah.
But her work sometimes was on like reading to writing
Hmm.
assessments. So it's kind of partially integrated, right? So the learner read some text, had maybe some comprehension questions, and then they were required to write an essay in response, sort of, or built off of what they had read. So it
Yep.
was trying to overcome things with students maybe not having the background knowledge to answer a question in writing.
Yeah.
But they could obviously, it's same assessment, they could look at the reading again, and it showed a benefit for their writing ability
Hmm.
because it wasn't entirely off the top of their head. They had
Right.
some, and isn't that
Interesting.
normal life? We
Sure.
usually can
Reference
look
something.
at
Yeah.
something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
It's very what do you call it? Ecologically sound,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, yeah.
I would also add that I come from a background of I come from a community of teachers who often would emphasize like just let them do free writes, like just let them
Yeah.
write whatever they want, and
Mhm.
as a
And let them
general,
track progress over time.
yeah, and just to kind of check what's in their head.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that too. I think as
Yeah,
part
me
of a
too.
balanced
That's
diet, yeah,
mainly what I did.
sure.
Yeah.
So it's just measuring different things. It's just something else. Is it
Yeah.
measuring what they can do outside of a classroom? We don't know. Maybe it's
Yeah.
you'd have to
Maybe
somehow
it's at least
make that
hinting
argument.
towards, yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
That unrehearsed stuff is, I think, very valuable.
It's a measure of language. I don't know if it captures, like, can they transfer it to other pragmatic situations? Like, can they
Sure.
use those words in a situation where it's like they're writing a more formal kind
Writing.
of essay? Well, they'd have to be
Yeah.
trained in the more formal essay conventions, which is a different
Sure.
thing. The speech notes are a different kind of convention. So yeah, but as a check on language, it might be a better kind of formative thing to do. But
Hmm.
for beginners, I'd be happy to build up their confidence with a graded thing that's just their own brain dump. I think that's okay, especially at the earlier stages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've covered everything we want to cover.
Those are the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this was from our personal experience, but also I think we have a lot of experience with ACTFL and their IPAs, the integrated performance assessments, bits of research that are just lodged in our heads. I can't,
Yeah, yeah, and
I
kind of
don't know
this
exactly
amalgam
what to
of things.
cite. Yeah,
And I think, yeah, I mean, I'll find a Leah Plackens thing. We can link to things about IPAs. I think we could maybe link to some of the things that the Department of Hawaii did, 'cause that I was involved with
you
in
worked on
terms
that.
of
Yeah,
some assessment of like goals, like that kind of rubric kind of thing, in terms of how you're going to give a grade to an
yeah.
assessment.
And there are ACTFL, I think the Foreign Language Annals has published some research articles on IPAs.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
a number of them actually. Yeah.
sure. And then, but coming back to that original question about like what's one research article I can look at, I think this
It's just not.
we're sort of circling around the point that it shouldn't be one. It shouldn't just be one. That you probably, any research article is going to be coming from a particular context, and so you
Right.
want to get a better sense by reading multiple or reading a book or engaging with the professional organizations and not the research, such as the state of Hawaii for us,
Hmm.
ACTFL, and yeah, great. Okay. Well, thanks for
All right.
listening. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have
Thanks. Good
been,
to talk with you.
yep, I've been Dr. Reed Riggs.
And I'm Dr. Diane Neubauer.
Thank you.